Fully support this resolution and believe it should, must, and will stand. Before I move on to my constructive speech, however, I would like to refute the cases brought forward by the negative. The opposition has spoken to one point so far, that the UN promotes peace. However, they neglect to say that the UN also causes unnecessary death. What's more, they did not prove to us that the UN will stop making mistakes they have made in the past. If an organization cannot learn from its mistakes, well then, what kind of organization is that? Before moving on to my constructive speech, I would like to review the case brought forward by my working colleague. My partner has exposed the undemocratic nature of the United Nations and how it has meant both a serious disadvantage to Canada and contradiction of our beliefs as a country. I will now address some of the UN's failures to serve their purpose as peacekeepers and provide you with an alternative plan that will let our nation aid those to the full extent of our ability, for no more about the UN's unfair policy and ineffective actions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's look back on perhaps the most terrible of the United Nations blunders, the Rwandan genocide. After the assassination of the President of the Republic of Rwanda, an extreme tension between the Tutsi and Hutu ethnic groups was ignited and went on to trigger one of the most devastating genocides of all time. As thousands were slaughtered daily, the United Nations just stood by and watched. Apparently, intervention was against their rules of engagement. Only the rebellious Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, with a handful of ill-equipped peacekeepers, stood between the Rwandans and utter destruction. Though the UN repeatedly ordered Dallaire to withdraw, he stood his ground and did all he could to save lives. But, despite his efforts, between 800,000 and a million Rwandans lost their lives before the genocide came to a halt. To this day, countless people still ask, is simple violation of the rulebook really enough to stop the UN from preventing mass slaughter? Does their slogan not say, a stronger UN for a better world? Yet, it seems, even with the power of 200 nations at its back, they didn't make the world much better for those 900,000 Rwandans. We, the affirmative, strongly believe that the primary interest of the United Nations is to reinforce the security and peace of those in need. The UN is astoundingly ineffective. Here's yet another failure of the UN, again costing the lives of thousands of innocent people. In 1992, the Bosnian Serb army terrorized villages throughout eastern Bosnia. Over 100,000 civilians were forced to flee and hide. On April 16, 1993, the UN created a safe haven in Srebrenica. However, when the Bosnian Serb army attacked, the UN failed to muster enough forces to protect their so-called safe haven. This resulted in the worst mass murder in Western Europe since World War II. Again, I ask you, what is the purpose of the United Nations? And I quote from the UN's official website, to reinforce the global peace and security. Are they sustaining peace? No! The UN's sheer lack of effect has meant the death of millions. Are they reinforcing security? Well, not according to that day in 1993 when 100,000 people were slaughtered because of the UN's inability to protect them. Why then should Canada, whose people take pride in its peaceful nature, put its time and resources into an establishment that is not only faulty and unreliable, but, as my partner has illuminated, clearly against our beliefs as a country? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we, the affirmative, present to you a chance for Canada to help the world to its fullest extent. It's simple. Resign from the United Nations. As one nation, we can take the problems of the world into our own hands and act not despite, but alongside the United Nations. But you must be asking yourselves, why would Canada be more effective on its own? I'll explain now. Firstly, Canada cannot be delayed by the notorious veto system that currently governs the UN. There are many who accuse the UN of not acting quickly enough because of one simple fact. The 5 permanent members have a very difficult time deciding anything, as each country has its own separate interests, and it takes but one view to cancel suggestion. Many times, countries have been left unaided because of the UN's painfully slow decision process. But, as one nation, unified in purpose, independent Canada's decision will be much quicker and more decisive. Did you know that, for the money that Canada wastes on the UN, at least 17,000 houses could be built in Haiti each year? Most importantly, Canada will be available to help countries in need when the UN neglects them. Think back to Rwanda. As you recall, General Dallaire was a Canadian. However, the UN refused to send Canadian troops to him. But imagine if at that time Canada had been independent. Dallaire would have been sent a few thousand healthy, prepared Canadian troops, and as the United Nations stood by and watched who knows what great number of lives could have been saved. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do what is right for the world, and break free of the United Nations, we will be there to shelter the homeless, feed the starving, and protect those in danger when no one else will. We, the affirmative, have faith that you will take into account the importance of peace and security in this world and award the debate. Thank you for your time.
The second affirmative will now be cross-examined by the second negative. You have 3 minutes.
Are you aware about the level of education about teen pregnancy issues in Jamaica?
Yes, what of them?
So you are aware that there are in fact teens who don't know anything about protection, or even pregnancies can occur from having intercourse?
Of course.
Alright. Are you aware then that if a woman gets pregnant during high school in such a country, she will most likely be kicked out of the house, out of school, disowned by her family, and likely will suffer greatly financially?
I'm sure the same can be said for most countries, but if
Yes.
you're addressing this as one of the flaws of the UN, we're not denying the UN has its flaws.
Alright, okay. Have you ever heard of the WCGF, the Women's Center of Jamaica Foundation?
Yes.
Alright? Then you would also know that, that they provide education about childcare.
Yes.
Then you would also know, then, I would assume, that this foundation alone helps over 1,000 people a year.
Yes, of course the UN
And-
helps people.
and-
It also wastes innocent lives, and that's what's important.
Okay, and you also know that this is a subset of the UN.